Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for our webinar. This webinar is eligible for CPE credits, and in order to receive the CPE credits, please answer the polling questions throughout this presentation that will pop up. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please submit them using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and we will do our best to answer as many as we can during the presentation. If we do not have the opportunity to answer your question live, our team will follow up after today's presentation. Also, all resources from today's webinar will be emailed out to attendees after the event. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to our host, Becca Meredith.
Thank you, Maddie. Welcome, everybody. So today we are going to go over the new Medicare bad debt template and also the new S-10 templates that are required for cost reports starting 9/30/2023. So just a quick introduction. My name is Becca Meredith. I am a senior manager here at Blue & Company. I have been here for about 10 years, and I am located in the Louisville, Kentucky office.
Hello, everybody. My name is Nick Ficklin. I am also in our Louisville, Kentucky office. I am a director here at Blue. I've been here about 14 years. I've specialized in Medicare DSH, Worksheet S-10, Medicaid DSH, pretty much my entire career. So I know I am going to be talking more about Worksheet S-10 today. Becca is going to focus more on the Medicare bad debt piece of it. But I did want to take just a few minutes before we get started. There are some changes with the Medicare DSH templates as well. There's not a ton of changes, so for time's sake, we did not include that in there. But there are similar new templates out there for Medicare DSH. There's not a ton of changes, but there are some. The main changes are related to the way we're reporting some of the newborn and nursery days. So if there are any questions, happy to have, to follow up after this webinar or to talk about it, set up a time to discuss anything Medicare DSH related. But we are today going to focus mainly on Worksheet S-10 and Medicare bad debts. I also did want to clarify a little bit of, I know we've seen a lot of confusion of, both the S-10 and obviously Medicare bad debts. They both mention bad debt. And I did want to mention, there are some pretty key differences, and it's not the same number going on both reports and being utilized on both of the templates. Obviously Medicare bad debt, we're focused on Medicare traditional only accounts. On the S-10, when we talk about bad debt, it's talking about all payers, all insured and uninsured patients go into that. So there are some pretty key differences. Also with the S-10, it's something that does not apply to critical access hospitals. It's still something that's on the cost report as a worksheet, but the requirements as far as the templates and filing these detailed logs is not something that is required for critical access facilities. So that's something, if you are part of a critical access facility, the S-10 really will not mean much for you. Also, if you are a sole community hospital and you always get paid, or normally get paid that hospital specific rate rather than the DRG level payments, that one change they did make this year is that you don't have to file the logs. You will not be subject to audit like you have been in the past. So that's definitely an improvement over how it's been historically. That is one big change, that if you are that sole community that always gets their hospital specific payment, that the DRG payments don't really matter. You will not be subject to these requirements of filing the logs and things like that. So wanted to just kind of throw that out there and clear that up. Obviously, if there are questions, we're happy to answer, but I'm going to turn it over to Becca. We're going to talk about Medicare bad debts first, and I'm going to turn it over to her.
Thanks, Nick. So can you see my slide that says, how can we help you? Nick,
Yes.
Is that what you're looking at?
Yeah.
Okay. So I just wanted to go through a couple things of how Blue & Company can help you. So when it comes to Medicare bad debt and DSH and S-10, we can help you prepare your log. So it can be current year that we are going to file with the cost report. We can fully prepare them, or we can do a high level review if you want to prepare them internally. We can also do a training for your team, so either high level or in depth. When it comes to Medicare bad debt, you cannot claim fee screens, so we can help you guys pull those off. And then we also can do a look back project. So that is looking at prior year cost reports and updating your listings, trying to pick up additional reimbursement for those years that might have been missed. So we are going to launch the first polling question. So if you would like CPE, please answer these. So the first one is, what type of facility are you a part of? Awesome. So it looks like we've got a lot of answers coming in. We almost have 100%, which is great. Okay. So we've got a good mix between PPS and critical access and then other. So it's great to see a variety on here today. So I am going to go over the Medicare bad debt section. Like Nick said, this is applicable for everybody. It doesn't matter if you're PPS, critical access, everybody has to file a Medicare bad debt listing with your cost report if you want to claim Medicare bad debt. So I'm not going to go into the details of all the different types of bad debt, but I did want to just give one slide of, hey, here's the 5 types of Medicare bad debt that hopefully you're claiming at your facilities. So the first one is going to be crossovers. These are going to be Medicare patients that cross over to Medicaid. Then you've got your charity patients. These are patients that come into the hospital, fill out a charity application. You guys approve that and deem them indigent. You've got your deceased patients, so specifically the ones that do not have an estate, so you know you're not going to get paid. And you've got your bankruptcy. These are going to be patients that file for bankruptcy, and then once they are discharged from their debt, you can claim it as Medicare bad debt. And then the last bucket is traditional. So if they don't fall in the other 4 buckets, these are patients that are just not paying their bill. So you're going to start sending them statements. They might go to a collection agency. And then once they come back and you stop collection efforts is when you can claim them as Medicare bad debt. All right, so on the screen here, you can see this is what the old Medicare bad debt template looks like. It was nice and small. It had 10 columns. So I wish it still looked like this, but this is the new template. So you can see there is a lot more information being required. There's now 24 columns instead of 10. There's also a header we have to provide. So we are thinking and hoping that by providing all this information up front, hopefully it will expedite the audit when it gets pulled from Medicare bad debt, because they will have more information up front. We will see if that holds true, but that is our hope. So just at a high level, some items to know. This is the template is required for cost reports beginning 10/1/2022 and after. So if your fiscal year end was 9/30/2023, you do have to file with this new template. So at this point, everybody should be preparing their logs for the next fiscal year. If you work on it monthly, you should already be using this new template as you're working on it throughout the year. The Medicare bad debt listing must be filed with the cost report every year. You need to make sure that the total of your detailed Medicare bad debt listing ties to the cost report. So the numbers you import in the cost report need to be exactly the same. This next section, this is a Blue & Company recommendation, not necessarily a requirement, but you do want to run some checks to make sure all your columns are populated Make sure things are occurring in the right order. So like, for example, crossovers, you want to make sure Medicare pays and Medicaid pays, and then you write it off. So just things that should be happening in a certain order, making some checks to make sure that's happening. CMS does want to see dates in this format. They have actually written this out, so it is required. That is Excel's standard format, so it shouldn't be too difficult. They do want to see your logs divided by inpatient and outpatient. They also want to see your logs divided by provider number. So you will have your main hospital, and then let's say you have a rural health clinic. That's going to have a separate tab. Let's say you've got a swing bed. That's going to have a separate tab. So any provider number you're claiming Medicare bad debt for is going to have its own tab. This next one is a balloon company recommendation. So it's not required, but we do recommend taking it a step farther and splitting it out by bad debt type. So kind of what this would look like in Excel. You can see along the bottom here, we've got different tabs. So I've got inpatient crossover, inpatient indigent, inpatient valid efforts. Then we switch. We go to outpatient crossover, outpatient indigent, so on and so forth. So you're going to have all these tabs for each one of your provider numbers. So it is a lot of tabs, but it does keep it very clean. And we do think that will help the Medicare auditors decipher what type of bad debt you're claiming. All right, so we've got our second polling question. All right, so we are interested to know, does your hospital currently prepare your facility's Medicare bad debt listings internally? I know we've got a lot of clients on here, so some of your answers are going to be no. All right, we've got awesome participation. Thank you guys for. So it looks like we're pretty split. We've got yes and no. We've got a few I don't knows. So that is helpful information. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to dive into every single column that is on the new template. That way, I can hopefully answer questions or confusion that you might have. Please use the Q&A if you have questions as I'm going through. Some of this is very straightforward, some of it is not. So I know there's been a lot of questions about some of the columns. So the first thing is the header. This is new that they're requiring. It's very easy, but it does need to be at the top of every single tab you have. This needs to be at the top. So title is always going to say Medicare bad debt. You've got your provider name. That would be the main hospital. CCN, this is going to be the main hospital's provider number. Then the sub-provider is going to be whoever you're working on that tab. So if it's the rural health clinic, you're going to put their provider number right here. Your cost report beginning date, your ending date. Are you working on inpatient or outpatient? Who's preparing it? The date you prepared it. And then these bottom two columns I'm going to go into later, but you're totaling up the tabs, basically, is what those are. So columns 1 through 6, these are going to be required for everybody. So you're going to see on all my slides, I've got a section down at the bottom that says all, or it might say crossovers only. So it's going to tell you for each column kind of which accounts you need to have it populated. So these first 6, 100% of the accounts need to be populated. You got last name, first name, admit date, discharge date, account number, HIC number. HIC number is like the Medicare number. Those are very easy. So then the next section is going to be column 7. This is the Medicaid number. So if they are a Medicaid patient, you're going to want to have this populated. If you have column 7 populated, you have to have column 10 populated. So they go hand in hand. They're both for crossovers. So you only want to populate this on crossovers. So you're going to have the Medicaid number and you're going to have the date that Medicaid paid in column 10. Column 8 is going to be a provider deemed indigent. So this is a yes, no column. So it's going to be yes if you deemed indigency, which would be charity, bankruptcy, or deceased. Number 9 is going to be the Medicare remittance date. This needs to be populated for everybody. So this is a Medicare bad debt log. So everybody needs to have traditional Medicare. You cannot claim Medicare Advantage. It's very important and people get confused on that. Column 10, like we talked about, this is going to be the Medicaid date if they're a crossover patient. And number 11 is going to be populated if it's applicable. So this is a secondary payer date. This is really going to be, I would recommend probably leaving this blank most of the time, unless you need it for something like in traditional and charity. You need to send the patient a bill within 120 days. If it takes you over 120 days to send that first statement, that's okay, but there needs to be a reason. So like you're trying to bill Medicaid or you're trying to bill an insurance. If you're doing that, put that date here, whether you get a paid remit, denied remit, or just a notification, put that date in here. That is going to help the auditor to know why it took you over 120 days to send that first statement. Okay. Column 12, beneficiary responsibility amount. So for most of the time, this is going to be the deductible plus coinsurance amount, the Medicare deductible plus coinsurance. If they are a QMB patient, you are going to write QMB. If they are a patient that you deemed indigent, so back in column 8, if you right here, if you said yes, they're indigent, then in column 12, you're going to enter a 0.
Becca, we have a question
Okay.
that I think might now be a good time. So question is Medicaid QMB all program types considered a Medicaid crossover? So they read recently we cannot bill any QMB recipient except SLMB, which is verified by the state.
Yes. So you cannot bill QMB patients. And so that stands for qualified Medicare beneficiary. And those are low income Medicare patients. So more likely than not, if they're a QMB, they're going to have Medicaid. So you're going to bill Medicaid. Medicaid is going to pay, you're going to write the balance off to a crossover. You can't bill Medicaid patients, so they kind of go hand in hand. Hopefully that answers your question. If it doesn't, please send me a follow-up email. And that the QMB stuff is new, having to point that out in the logs. You never had to point that out before. So that's definitely a new requirement. So column 13, this is going to be the day that you sent the first bill to the patient. So if, kind of on the QMB train, we'll say, if it's a QMB patient, you're going to put QMB in this column as well. You're not supposed to bill the patient, so you're going to say, nope, this is QMB. All other patients, you need to be billing until you, deem them as charity or they're sent to the collection agency. So that first statement that went out the door needs to go right here, except for on crossovers. Column 14 through 17. These are the columns that I think are the most confusing. They are the new columns that are required. It can be the same exact date for all columns, or it could be different for all the columns. It really depends on hospitals' procedures It also depends on which Medicare bad debt bucket or type you're talking about. So if you have questions, please reach out to me with an email. There's lots of scenarios, so I'd be happy to walk you guys through if you're unsure. Column 14, this is the AR write-off date. So this is going to be the date that the account went from AR, or basically came off AR in the hospital's financial system. So this is usually noted in the hospital system with a transaction like AR to bad debt or something like that. Column 15A, this is going to be sent to collection agency, yes or no. Did it go there or did it not? If it went to the collection agency, then you need to fill out column 15 to say when the account was returned from the collection agency. Column 16 is going to be the date that the account collection efforts ceased on the account. So, that could be the day it came back from the collection agency. It could be a few days after, but this is internally and externally. Your collection efforts are completely done. You're not trying to bill any more insurance. You're not sending statements. It's completely done. And then column 17 is going to be the Medicare write-off date. So this is generally the date that, like for a crossover, that's the date you're writing it off. For a charity, the date you're writing it off the hospital system. For traditional, the date you're writing it off to bad debt. Okay. Columns 18 through 24. These are also, the recoveries are also new. So a recovery is a payment on an account that you previously have claimed as Medicare bad debt. So you're going to want to subtract it out of the current year. So this first column here, 18, is going to be the amount you received. So let's say you received a $10 payment on an account you claimed as Medicare bad debt in 2020. You're going to put minus $10 right here in 18. And you're going to put 2020 in 19. So you're saying how much you recovered and what year you originally claimed it in. Column 20 is going to be the full deductible amount. Column 21 is going to be the full coinsurance amount. Column 22 is going to be the payments that are received prior to you writing it off. So this does not include Medicare payments. This is just secondary insurances after Medicare or patient payments. So if you write off an account, let's say in 2023, and then a month later, still in 2023, you receive another payment, they want you to put it back over here. So let's say you received a $100 payment and you're going to put the current year, 2023. So these recovery columns are going to be for accounts you previously claimed in prior years, and also for payments that you received in the current year, but after the account was written off to Medicare bad debt. And then in column 23 is going to be the final amount that you're trying to claim as Medicare bad debt. So essentially, you're totaling up deductible plus coinsurance, subtracting out any payments that you received prior to write-off, and also any payments that you received as a recovery. And that is going to give you your total amount in 23. Looks like we had a question come through. Nick, do you want to? You're muted.
Sorry.
It's okay.
It says we typically won't send balances under $50 to a collection agency. We have that stated in our policy. One of these accounts was recently selected during an NGS audit and they disallowed it. Since there is a column to designate if not sent to the collection agency, what is your experience with intermediaries disallowing those Also rare and a smaller balance, if disallowed on audit, it will create a larger, calculated, kind of extrapolated balance.
Sure. So it is okay that you don't send all, you have a criteria in place to not send all your accounts to the collection agency, but it still has to meet all the criteria to be a traditional Medicare bad debt. So you still have to send the patient a statement within 120 days. And then from that date, you still have to collect on the account for 120 days. So all accounts have to meet that just off top to qualify as Medicare bad debt in the traditional bucket. Then after that, you need to have it in your policy that says you're going to treat those under $50 and lower. You're not going to send those to the collection agency. Also very important to note, you have to treat Medicare and non-Medicare accounts exactly the same. So hopefully that answers your question. Please follow up if it didn't. Sorry. So there's one more column. It's column 24. It says comments. I'm not really sure what they would want you to put in there. I would recommend probably leaving it blank unless there's something you really want to point out to the auditor. But yeah. So then that brings me back to the header. So you will see the bottom two rows. It's a total of column 23. So if I go back, we talked about this is your bad debt amount you're trying to claim. So you're going to total up this entire column, and that is going to go right here. And then you're also going to total up everything. Dual eligible is another word for crossovers. So everything that you're trying to claim as a crossover, you're going to want to put total up and put in this line. So taking it way back to a couple columns ago, if you have the Medicaid number and the Medicaid date filled out showing you're trying to claim it as a crossover, you want to total those accounts up for this line. Okay, and with that, I am going to pass it over to Nick.
All right, thank you, Becca. All right, so now we're going to dive into the worksheet S-10. For the worksheet S-10, Becca we're going to go through a similar process of kind of walking through the different columns on the templates. S-10, we do have, Becca, if you want to go to the next slide, I did want to point out, so the S-10, really we're focused on two pieces. We have charity and we have bad debts. And so as I mentioned, charity is all bad, or bad debts is all bad debts, all payers. We're not just talking about Medicare traditional accounts anymore. And so on the charity, we're talking about line 20 is where you report the charity write-offs amount, charity write-off amounts. That the big distinction on the charity is, and a big emphasis on it is which column are you putting in. There's a column 1, which is uninsured, column 2, which is insured. And that's one of the biggest focus areas during the audits, and does make a really big impact as far as reimbursement wise. It is very beneficial to have things in that column 2 as an insured charity versus uninsured. So that's why it's the big focus area of the auditors. And really the main difference is there can be insured accounts in that uninsured column, but it's the only thing you can report in the insured column 2 is the unpaid deductible, co-insurance, copay amounts that were written off to charity. So this includes, this is for all payers. So that's, thinking about, a lot of your high deductible, commercial plans and, marketplace plans, there can be some pretty big dollars, but the only thing that can be included is those unpaid deductible, co-insurance, copay amounts that are written off to charity. One caveat is if you claimed it as a Medicare bad debt charity, you cannot put that on here. So that's where, if you're claiming it as a Medicare bad debt charity, you're already getting reimbursed from a Medicare bad debt perspective. So, from CMS, they don't want you putting on that and being able to collect on it again, or even more than what you've already done as a Medicare bad debt. So it is important as if you are preparing these listings internally, it is important to match up your S-10 listings to your Medicare bad debt listings to make sure there's nobody you're claiming as a Medicare bad debt showing up on your charity listings. For reference, we go back whenever we're preparing, we go back to the prior to, the past 2 years of S-10 listings, the past 2 years of Medicare bad debt listings to make sure we haven't claimed it on a prior year on the S-10 or on a Medicare bad debt. And also, kind of match to the current year. So there is some overlap here, and that it does get very confusing. But I would encourage everybody, it is important to match up your S-10 listings to your Medicare bad debt listings, to make sure that you're not claiming things in there on the charity side of things. Line 26, the bad debt expense, that is all bad debts. And where this is different, where it gets confusing, I think, for people is for the S-10, that when you claim this on the S-10 as a bad debt write-off, it is when, as Becca mentioned earlier, it's that AR to bad debt write-off date. It's not when you get it back from collections. You don't have to wait the 120 days, all that. The date that you're claiming it as an S-10 bad debt expense is the date it goes from AR to bad debt. So that's why it is important to make sure that you're looking at multiple years there, that you're not claiming things in other years. A lot of your traditionals, a lot of times those traditionals could be in the same year. It's not always different years. But that is the biggest thing is that AR to bad debt write-off date is the bad debt date that we're talking about for S-10. And really, kind of the big thing at both of those lines, it goes through a calculation. It comes up with your uncompensated care. And it's really kind of the unpaid, or it's the cost of both the charity and the bad debt for that year. And that's the amount that's being used by CMS for your future Medicare uncompensated care payments. All right, we'll go to the next slide. So some items to know, similar to bad debt, or similar to Becca, it is for the same cost report periods beginning on or after 10/1 of 2022. So we're going through the first rounds of them right now with the recent September 30th facilities. Both something new this year. Historically, only the charity there's been a requirement to have a charity detailed listing filed with the cost report. Now there is a requirement, both the charity and the bad debt expense have to have detailed, have to have these templates, these detailed templates completed and filed with the initial cost report filing to be accepted. Obviously, double checking, making sure that, everything from the listings is tying to what goes on the cost report. But one of the big changes for these new templates is historically, we've reported one S-10 listing for the entire, they call it the entire hospital complex. And that includes, your patients being billed out of your normal hospital Medicare provider number. It also includes if you have a distinct psych or rehab, or if you have rural health clinics. Everything's been in one list. Doesn't matter where it's being billed out of. It's all coming in one list. Now, similar to the Medicare bad debts, they are requiring separate S-10 listings for each Medicare provider number. So that is a pretty big change that we have not had to do in the past. So as you're preparing both listings for this year, we have to make sure to separate what's being, what's under the normal hospital Medicare provider number, what's under the different various Medicare provider numbers. All right, so similar to the bad debts, we've got a lot going on here. It's in a similar format than as what Becca walked through with the Medicare bad debts. But really where the changes to, for those that are familiar with, that have gone through an S-10 audit, the information itself, there have been some additions. Most of the additions, things we're doing differently is on the charity side of things, not necessarily the bad debt expense. So I think a lot of the changes and the confusion will be on the charity piece rather than the bad debt expense. So we're going to dive in similar to Becca did of going through the columns and pointing out some of the changes and the differences.
Okay, there's a question.
Okay.
It says, is the self-pay discount also considered part of the charity for this report?
Yes, self-pay discount is still counted as charity, but you have to make sure it is that uninsured charity. So if your facility does provide, kind of the norm, the traditional, 25, 50%, 40, whatever the percentage off of total charges to all uninsured patients, those are still allowable. And you have to make sure that those are stated in your policy that you do provide those. And it's similar to, in your financial assistance policy, that has to be stated there of what your policy is, what the amount is. But yes, those are still acceptable. They just got to make sure that they're in the uninsured piece of the S-10. Okay, so similar header to what Becca indicated earlier. Really it's the provider name, the hospital CCN. So the hospital CCN has to be on, no matter if you're reporting one of the sub provider or the RHC, S-10 listings, that normal hospital CCN still has to be in there. It's got the cost report beginning and date, prepared by, date prepared. And, similar to how Becca showed the different types of, the column 23 and the dual eligibles. This is where on the charity piece, we have that column 1 and column 2. So it's column 20 is coming from the S-10. It's that charity column, but breaking out. And this is where on your listings, it needs to tie to this header of whatever the sum of your reporting for the uninsured charity needs to tie to that uninsured column 20 line, and then vice versa on the insured. Okay, so columns 1 through 10, there's not a ton different here. Obviously those first 5 columns are just, your basic kind of patient demographic data. The big change here is this insurance status. Historically, if you've been a part of the audits, you've just had to say something was insured or uninsured. You've given, that exact language. Now they want you to put a number. So there's 3 options instead of 2 now. If it is an uninsured patient, you put a 1. Just a normal indicate number 1 equals uninsured. And where the difference is, and now they ask if it's an insured patient, but the charity write-off was basically related to something other than the deductible coinsurance copay amount, they want you to put a number 2. So number 1 and number 2 will technically fall in that uninsured bucket. If it was an uninsured discount, obviously that you would put a 1. But if there's a charity write-off related to something that was a non-covered service or something that was just non-allowable from the hospitals or from the payer's perspective that wasn't a deductible coinsurance copay, you would put a number 2. And then any of the insured and then the charity write-offs related to the deductible copay coinsurance amount, you would label it as a number 3. So that is a big change, or not a big change, but that is a change from what historically has been reported on the listings. And then, obviously over to the right there, primary payer, secondary payer. If there is a secondary insurance, you would put it there. Total charges. This is total hospital charges. And so if the pro fees and the hospital charges are in the same system, we want to make sure that we're reporting the hospital charges and pro fee charges separately. The way the instructions are really weird. In column 9, they say report hospital charges only, excluding professional fees. But then in column 10 to say, if you reported professional fees in column 9, or if the professional fees in column 9, or if the total charges include professional fees in column 9 to break out what those pro fees are. So I don't know why you wouldn't just report the hospital charges to begin with in column 9. But yeah, they do want a breakout between hospital charges and physician charges. But my recommendation would be if you can get to that breakout, just report the hospital charges in column 9. You don't need to do anything with column 10 there. And this is really the big one, I would say, of what we found has been the most difficult piece to these new logs. It's not necessarily, for those who have been involved in audits, it's not necessarily a new issue. It's just never been required to be reported until now. As I indicated, for the charity piece, you have to break it out between insured, uninsured, and the only thing that can go in that insured charity bucket are charity write-offs related to the patient's, insurance deductible, co-insurance, copay. So now they are requiring us to put whatever that deductible, co-insurance, copay amount is. So it's the total. It's not necessarily the amount of the deductible, co-insurance, copay that was written off to charity. It's asking for what is the total patient's deductible, co-insurance, copay. If you do not put anything in here, you're not allowed to basically claim any insured charity. They will require you to have something in here. So if there was $100 charity write-off, you would have to have at least $100 or greater reported in this deductible, co-insurance, copay column for that to be accepted as an insured charity. And this has been I would say that the most difficult piece that for providers to pull, depending on what your EHR system is. It can be very difficult to pull this information accurately. When we were going into this, we were checking with a lot of our clients that we're on different systems of Cerner, Meditech, Epic, CPSI, all these different things of trying to figure out, is there a common place that our clients that have been able to pull this information, how do they pull it? Where are they going? What we found is, unfortunately, every hospital is different. It's really how you're doing things on the front end and how you're coding some of these adjustments and coding some of the transactions on the front end. There's not really a uniform way of what we found to say all Meditech, all hospitals that utilize Meditech can go to this exact same place. This is where it's going to be and report it out. We found it that every provider is different, and so we've had to approach it differently with everybody. But this is where I see that the biggest issues, the biggest hurdles with these new templates, based on our experience of being able to pull the data. Okay. All right, we have our next polling question. All right, so just as indicated, have you been able to identify how to pull these deductible, co-insurance, copay amount figures from your EHR system? A few more seconds, we're getting close. Okay. So as you can see, we're about 50-50 on yes and no. A lot of them haven't tried yet, which I certainly can understand. I would highly recommend, regardless of what your fiscal year is, if you're a 630 and you don't really have to worry about reporting anything until next fall, I would highly encourage to start looking into this immediately. Because I said we've had some difficulty pulling it. We've had to try multiple attempts, kind of different ways to try to do it. And it can be pretty burdensome. So I would highly recommend, if you haven't done it yet, start working with your report writing folks and your business office folks to try to see how we can identify this information. Okay, so now we're going to go through kind of the second half of the columns. Column 12, that's any payments you've received from a third-party payer. They basically, anybody that's not an individual patient, they count as a third-party payer. Includes work comp, auto, VA, all of those things. They count that as a third party. If it's not coming from the patient, they want you to report it there. Columns 13 and 14, these are some differences here compared to how things have been reported in the past. Historically, on the charity, basically these two columns were called other adjustments. Is all that they really referred to it at, and how it had to be reported. This includes obviously your insurance contractual amounts, if there are any courtesy discounts or prompt pay or administrative write-offs or anything else, related to non-covered charges or, denied, things like that. Historically, you could group them all up into one column. Now they're asking for a breakout. So in column 13, they're asking for specifically what are the contractuals? What are the adjustments related to the contractual amounts? Those insurance contractual amounts. So the only people that will have an amount in here will be people that do have insurance. And there was that contractual adjustment taken for this. Everything else, they're kind of grouping into these non-covered charges. So if there was some type of administrative adjustment, courtesy adjustment, some denial, some other reason for an adjustment made on the account that was not a payment, that was not a charity write-off. This does not include uninsured discounts, because we're for S-10 purposes, you can include that uninsured discount as a charity if you have it in the policy, so it would not include that. But basically everything else would fall into this non-covered charges column. Going on, patient payments, it's pretty self-explanatory. If there were any bad debt write-offs, any related to this claim, regardless of when that happened, they are asking for that amount to be put into here, to be factored in. And here's where we start getting into the charity pieces of it, the charity write-off pieces. So obviously you can see the uninsured discounts, they are asking for those to be reported separately. And then they have the charity care write-offs. And this is where it's probably going to be pretty difficult to identify of what goes in that column 18. What we don't know is how stringent they're going to be of how closely they're going to audit of what's in that charity non-covered charges versus this other charity, because basically that other charity is everything that's not an uninsured discount or the charity of non-covered charges. And so really everything, or the only thing going into that column 18 would be if you have identified that there was a charity write-off related to, something for an insured patient that was something other than that deductible co-insurance copay, that's what this is where the charity would go. And then basically everything else goes in that column 19.
Nick, we have a couple questions.
Okay.
So the first one, I believe, is going back to column 13. It says, is this contractuals related to cost reporting period only?
No, so this would be contractuals related to the account, regardless of when that contractual adjustment happened.
Okay. And the next question is, are uninsured discounts occur right away, and so would potentially be reported in a different year from what a subsequent charity write-off? How do we handle that?
So yeah, if I completely understand that. So if you had an uninsured discount in FY 2022, you would report only that uninsured discount amount and that the date that uninsured discount happened on the 2022 S-10, and say in FY 23 you had a subsequent charity write-off related to that patient balance, you would just report the amount written off to charity and the date that charity transaction happened. So that is very common that patients are showing up, the same patients are showing up on multiple years if they have an uninsured discount and a subsequent charity write-off. But yes, you would report it in different years, and the write-off dates and write-off amounts would be, just the uninsured write-off amount would be the date that transaction happened or that adjustment happened. And then in the 2023, in the subsequent year, would just be the charity care amount and the date that charity care transaction or adjustment happened.
Okay, there's another question.
Okay.
Following up to that, do you need to include the uninsured in that case in the other adjustments column?
Yes. So in that case, it would kind of show up in that other adjustment. Say it would not be a contractual. That yes, it would be that uninsured discount would it. So say in that example I was just saying, where there was a charity care write-off in 2023, on the 2023 S-10, you would report 0 in that uninsured discount amounts, because that uninsured discount amounts is basically, that's what you're claiming as charity on this S-10 for this year. Column 20 over there is the sum of 17, 18, and 19. So if the uninsured discount happened in a prior year, you would not want to claim that in the current year. You would put that in that, basically that non-covered charge amount, or non-covered charge in column 14 in 2023.
Okay, that's all we got.
Okay, that's where I expected all the questions, to be honest. It's because it does get pretty confusing. So as I mentioned, we'll kind of go through this pretty quickly. There's not many changes. I do want to leave some time for questions if there are any. Similar to Medicare bad debts and charity, like we saw, very similar format. There's not really many changes compared to those familiar with the audits that have taken place. It's pretty much the same template. But we will walk through them real quick. The biggest change here really is now is the reporting by subcomponents of the different Medicare provider numbers. That's really the biggest difference here, is that historically we've just had one altogether. Now it is different, or that you have to have a separate listing for each of those subcomponents. And then, so column 1 through 8, pretty basic. I don't think all these are pretty self-explanatory. The one change would be that, similar to the charity, you have a similar reporting mechanism on the insurance status. Instead of just saying insured, uninsured, they do have the same 1, 2, 3 category. It doesn't really matter. I would say it's not important for it to be insured or uninsured or non-covered on the bad debt expense. It all gets grouped up into one. So I don't see this as an area of they're not going to focus on this. I think we're using a similar format. So for most of you, when you're reporting, it'll probably be a 1 or a 3 as insured, uninsured. That it shouldn't really be an area of focus here. Okay, and then similar, kind of what we on the charity, we've got the inpatient, outpatient is something to break out. Again, you don't get reimbursed differently if it's inpatient or outpatient, but they do ask for that. And then similar with the charges of reporting hospital charges and pro fee charges if they are tracked. If you can break those out. We've got patient payments, third-party payments. If there was a charity write-off related to that account, it doesn't matter when that charity write-off happened. It didn't happen to have to happen in this current year. It's looking at the account in total reported here. And then on the contractual allowance other amount, they use kind of the same way it used to be, of they don't ask for contractual versus other now. They kind of group it in like how it's always been on this bad debt expense compared to the charity. And then obviously, there's the write-off date and the write-off amount. So the write-off date is that date of AR to bad debt. It's not the same write-off date as what you would think of a Medicare bad debt, that it has to come back from collections and all those things. It is that AR to bad debt date is the write-off date that we're utilizing. And then column 17, that's kind of that is the number that will tie to what goes on the cost report. That'll go up to the header. And I do want to make sure that everybody knows, when we're reporting bad debts here, it is net of recoveries, net of any reversals that have happened on that. But it's the net activity during the fiscal year. So it is possible in FY 2022, you wrote off an amount of $10,000. FY 2023, you found out that patient had insurance. You took it off of bad debt and brought it back into AR and billed and collected from the insurance. In 2023, we would want to see a negative $10,000 in 2023. So when you're reporting this, it's not net activity in total. It's what happened during that fiscal year of reporting the net activity, whether it be collections, write-offs, reversals. It's what happens in that fiscal year is the most important piece. Okay, and then real quickly, I know we do have one more polling question. I want to make sure we get to it so everybody's on here. What are some of the impacts? What are some of the the cost and anticipated issues? Really the impacts and the cost are if you don't utilize these templates, you are at risk of the cost reports being denied. What we don't know, because this is new, I'm expecting the MACs to be a little lenient on things, but we don't exactly know what CMS's guidance have given to all the MACs of how strict they have to be of if something's missing, does it get denied? If they don't break it out by the different Medicare denied or provider numbers, what's going to happen? So depending on how strict they are, it could be some pretty substantial costs of, obviously with the Medicare bad debt, it has a substantial direct cost on the reimbursement and the settlement. S-10 doesn't necessarily, in fact, doesn't impact the current year's settlement. But it could, if the cost report's denied in total, it could really cause some pretty big costs there. And then anticipated issues, I think we both try to point out, where the big changes were and what the focus areas were. I would say on the S-10, that breaking out that deductible coinsurance copay is the biggest issue I see happening. And so, if there are things, we are definitely here to help, happy to jump on a call. That leads to our next polling question. And I want to make sure to get that in if anybody has to jump off. So next, if you are interested in having a follow-up conversation or you have other questions, please let us know. It could be on both topics, DSH, bad debts, whatever. Just want to make sure that if you have additional questions that we can't answer today, that we are following up with you and making sure that we answer anything that you have. Give a little more time so everybody can answer. Okay, so a lot of people don't have questions, which is good. It means we couldn't have done too bad, or they just want to stop talking to us. But no, we really thank you all for your time today. I know we are cutting close to time here. Happy to answer if you do have additional questions, concerns. We're happy to jump on a call, shoot us an email, whatever it may be, and we can help in whatever way we can.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.